God bless you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Illegitimate game, the I game. This is Brother Derek. Continuing with this series about the attributes of God. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a question many of us ask many different times. And it's a question people, Christians, non-Christians, every religion, everybody wants to know. And the question is, can I trust God? The obvious answer is yes. But for some of us, it's not so obvious because of past experiences, this phenomenon called church hurt. And sometimes we don't trust God because we just don't know him. So for those of you who are following the show, I started with 5 attributes already. This is number 6. But this one, I want to answer the question, can I trust God? And the answer is yes, because God is faithful. So how do we know God is faithful? We know God is faithful because of his omniscience and his omnipotence. God never has an emergency. Another reason is God doesn't change his mind because of feelings and emotions. God's not human like we are. God's not fickle. The other reason is God will never break his promise because he's faithful. When God says something, it's going to happen. And over again in the Bible, we see examples of that happening. When God tells people, I'm going to save you, he always saved them. When God tells people, I'm going to punish you if you don't change, he always punished them. But in our lives, how do we know we can trust God? Well, the sun always rises, the sun always sets, we always have oxygen to breathe. Your heart's always beating when you sleep, and your lungs are always contracting and expanding, and these are things that happen without your permission, and you're not the one doing it. So the fact that you're alive after all you've been through, don't devalue that. Just think about everything you've been through. Like my body, I got 27 scars. God healed me every time. So when I look at my scars, I don't get upset and bitter. I just thank God and remember, and it reminds me that after all the mistakes I made, God still healed me and he kept me going and he kept me healthy and he kept me strong. But God doesn't have any emergencies. He's going to do the miracles based upon his schedule, not ours. Kind of like the eclipse. People were trying to say the eclipse meant something because of 4/8/24, but God has his own schedule. God is not living by our American Gregorian calendar. It's a new calendar. God's not going to move because of our numbers. God has his own numbers. And, some of you know the Hebrew calendar, the Chinese calendar is like, why would God use our calendar to move? And if you remember, nothing happened that day. We just put on our paper goggles, looked at some pictures and some videos, stared up at the sun, and it was cute. But nothing happened because God is faithful. God's in complete control regardless of all of the internet frenzies and the anxiety they try to sell us. But I'm going to give an example, though, of how we know God is faithful. And I'm going to give one of my examples. Like I told you, I got 27 scars. But this one was a major event in 2006 when I crashed a motorcycle. The doctors up at MCV were trying to scare me into having a surgery, but I didn't want to become Frankenstein. I didn't want to have metal in my neck. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to trust God to heal me. And because God did miracles for me when I was a child, I knew God was real even though I wasn't religious at the time. This is 2006. I was not a Christian at the time at all. I was still a 5%er, Wu-Tang, Hebrew, Israelite, Muslim. So I was all over the place in my spirituality. But like I said, God had no emergency. And after I crashed the motorcycle, I was stuck in the bed for 2 weeks. The first 10 days I was in a coma. But when I came out the coma, I was stuck in the bed for another 2 weeks because I couldn't move. I had broken bones in my neck. And I had broken bones in my back. So the doctors were trying to convince me to put metal in my neck. I was like, nah, I'm going to trust God. Even though I wasn't going to church at the time or any of that. But something in me said, let God do it. Don't trust these people. You need God. You don't need men. This is a moment to get right with God. Like, that was the voice on the inside. And because God had no emergency, he didn't even heal me overnight. So eventually I left the hospital and went home. And I was just sitting there upset, angry, bitter, mad, crying, embarrassed with myself for crashing the motorcycle. But the voice on the inside was like, yo, just trust God. So I ended up calling my parents and I started going to church with them. And just little by little, I started reading the Bible again, we call it wrestling with God. I was having that spiritual experience. And I was just reading the Bible, remembering stuff I read as a child, and I started to hear God's voice again. I stopped listening to the crazy music I was listening to. I watched TV a lot less. And I just learned how to hear God's voice. And I say maybe 5 or 6 weeks, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. I ended up going back to the doctor. They did the MRIs again, they did the x-rays again, they looked at my spine and looked at my neck. And the doctor said, your neck seems to be healing itself. You don't need the surgery. Now, I wanted to celebrate, but I was kind of in shock myself. And it's kind of funny because we say we trust God and we ask God to do something, but then when he does it, it's like I couldn't believe it. So when I saw the MRI and he was showing it to me and the bones were healing themselves and my neck was realigning, I was just like, wow, God did do it. So now I was like, okay, God is real again. Even though I knew it, but when he actually does it, I'm still in shock. So God is faithful. And because he has no mercy, he didn't do it overnight. Because if God healed me overnight, I probably would have jumped right back on the motorcycle and broke my neck again. Because that's how, I was about to say stupid, but I don't want to say stupid. But sometimes we do things that don't make sense. If God gives you something too easy, you don't appreciate it. So it took about a month before I went back to the doctor, but then he's like, yo, your neck healed. So I'm like, okay, God did do it. So we all need to understand God is faithful. Regardless of how you feel, regardless of what you think, God is going to do what he said he's going to do. And if you trust him, he's going to do it his way and do it the right way. Because in all that time I was waiting, I was reading the Bible and I was cleaning up my life because I was trying to make God happy. And in the meantime, I was like, okay, I got to get back in his word. I got to start walking with God and stop trusting myself because I am not God. Because one of the concepts of being a 5%er is we start making man equal with God. That's where all the words come from. Gamar's Dubois, wisdom, strength, and beauty. Like we start thinking we're little gods, but we're not. And our lives prove it, our decisions prove it, our physical health proves it because I didn't heal myself, God did. And the other beautiful thing about God is he doesn't change with his emotions. He doesn't change with his feelings. So even when I was disappointing God, he was still coming through taking care of me because I didn't work during this time either. And I had my whole family together. So, you know, we still had a place to stay. We still had food. We were able to find another car. You know, because my car ended up getting repoed because I wasn't working. You know, altogether it took about 8 months before I went back to work. Long story short, but I'm just talking about the miracle in my neck because not needing the surgery. But in all that time, I was still making mistakes here and there. I didn't become a perfect Christian overnight. But God didn't change. He took care of me, he took care of my children, he took care of everybody. But the miracle took time because I had to change from the inside out. So just look at your life and what are you asking God to do? You're wondering, can I trust God? Can God trust you? Can he trust you with power? Can God trust you with resources? If God gave you everything on your wish list, what would you do with it? Because sometimes it's us. And when you change according to God's wishes and according to God's will, he will give you everything you want and need because he's always faithful. God never changes and God never breaks his promises. If God promised you life and life abundantly, he's going to do it. And it's so easy to compare your life to other people's lives, but you don't know what they're going through and you don't know their process. So we also have to stop comparing things. Because you can have the perfect life, but as soon as you tune into Instagram, you see somebody's life better than yours, now you hate yours. And it's so easy to say God's not faithful because I ain't got this and I ain't got that. But comparison is always the thief of joy. Many of us heard that phrase before, and that phrase is very true. Because like I said about my scars, they remind me of where I come from. And every now and then I do get ungrateful, and so I have to remind myself I'm okay. Because God is faithful. God gave me everything I asked for. Knowledge, wisdom, health, everything. But we have to go through these processes. Just like when my physical health declined and I was having heart problems, God fixed all that. Matter of fact, I'll give you another one. This happened recently. God healed my heart. I literally felt it. My son had car trouble, so I gave him my car, and I was walking back and forth to work. So I was walking 6 miles a day. You know, I've been lifting weights. I've been lifting weights off and on for the last 12 years. But I hadn't really been walking and playing a lot of basketball because, like I said, I had a few other health problems with my back. But anyway, God is faithful because my son had car trouble, I gave him my car and I walked to work. And it's 3 miles one way. So during that time I was walking back and forth. Walking is a lot of stress on the body. But doing all that walking also showed me how weak I was. Because lifting weights and cardio is two different things. So in the midst of that, God literally healed my heart one day. I was walking through my apartment and I just felt it. I thought I was having a heart attack. But God was literally healing my heart, and I literally felt it. I felt my heart expanding, contracting, and then peace. And ever since then, I've been able to walk, run easily. I can run up and down the steps, everything. But doing all that walking, which is hard work, it would take me an hour, 15 minutes to walk those 3 miles. But in the midst of that, God literally healed my heart. So we have to understand God is faithful, but he does everything in the process. And while I was doing that walking back and forth to work, I was praying the whole time. I was communing with God most of the time. I would turn my AirPods on and just be listening to music, and sometimes I would hear something say, turn the music off, and I cut the music off and just start hearing God. So everything is a process. But God is faithful. We just have to be patient and get in tune with him. And God keeps his promises. Like there's one famous one, I think it's Isaiah 41, where it says, those that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. If you read that in the Hebrew, what it means is walking at God's speed. So when God speeds up, you speed up. When God slows down, you slow down because you're walking in tandem, like the old potato sack races. So waiting on God is not just sitting still, letting him do all the work. You're walking with God at his speed. So sometimes we want things fast and we want things now, but you have to go at God's pace. That's what it means to wait on the Lord. But we think he's not faithful because we didn't get it how we wanted it, if we wanted it, and when we wanted it. God's never going to give you what you want, ladies and gentlemen. He's only going to give you what you need because he's a faithful God and because he's your Father. So we just have to trust him. Because I came back to walk with God after the accident. I didn't want to go through all that, crashing that motorcycle. But that's what it took to save my soul. So if I had to go in a coma for 2 weeks and sit in the hospital for 2 weeks and lay in the bed broken for 3 months just to get right with God, that's cool. It's better than in eternity being lost. Nobody wants to go there. And if I had to walk back and forth to work every day and lose my car just to get my heart healed, that's better than heart surgery. Because people are having bypass surgeries every day. I didn't even need one. God healed my heart by making me walk to work because my son had car trouble. So God does it his way, and he is faithful. You can't trust God. He's going to do everything you want him to do. Peace.